Hi, so member of MIG Welding Forum, new member, not too sure what to do with their Harrison lathe, or they're having some issues. So we'll just talk you through a Harrison 140 and how you cut with the carriage, power feed, power facing, that sort of thing. So power surfacing, the correct term. So to take you through a Harrison 140, this is mine. This come out of a school. It's the wrong colour, it's an absolute mess, but it does work. It works very accurately for a school lathe. So, start off at the top of the headstock. Clutch, you should know this, you seem to be using the machine. Don't mean to teach to suck eggs, but you never know what someone's knowledge of that machine is if they've come from something different. Clutch, gear selectors, very simple. People seem to get really confused. You're operating one gear. You're not meshing two sets of shafts. You're just operating one gear. Each gear lever has three positions. Low and high, and a neutral in the middle. You can't operate this shaft and this one at the same time. They lock each other out. One of these always has to be in neutral for the other one to move. So this shaft is in neutral. If we wanted to, and this is low speeds, this is high speeds. So it's very simple. You've got your low speeds along the top, your high speeds along the bottom. But they also correspond to this low and high gear. So you can see we've got 34 and 215. So that's the lowest speed on your low range and your lowest speed on the high range. So these two pictures here refer to this knob on the front. It's fairly self-explanatory. You can see this knob here, so that to get 34, this shaft has to be in neutral. This one goes all the way to the right, so we're in 34. So if we turn the lathe on now, we're doing 34 RPM. If we wanted 215, we'd chuck this in high, spin the spindle, 215. I won't run this at 750 because it's got a big 4-jaw chuck. But you get the idea. If I wanted 75, I'd go low, so that's low, 75, and this lever up the top has to be to the right. That's 75 RPM. If I went in high, it'd do 480. That's a bit fast for this big 4-jaw. So, we'll go back down to our 215 speed. There we go. How this shaft works here is, you've got your spindle through the headstock, and you've got a gear that runs on a sleeve along the spindle, and you're just using a fork to move its high and low gear, and that meshes with the half shaft in the back, which runs off of these. So it's a very, very simple gearbox. There's nothing complicated about it. Only ever one of these is engaged. You don't get like different ratios by turning both. So we've talked about high and low lever. If you want a neutral on your lathe and you want to spin the chuck to clock working, you put that in the middle. See that sits in the middle there? Put that in the middle. You can spin your chuck by hand. If you whack it in to high, you're going to have a hard time turning the jaw. And that's how you change your chucks out. This red knob here, you might have seen, that's your tumbler. Now, what this does is changes the direction the lead screw or the feed shaft turns. So to the left, the lead screw will turn clockwise. If you're looking at it this way, it will turn clockwise. If you turn it to the right, it will turn anti-clockwise when you're looking at it from this direction. In the middle is neutral. When it's in neutral, nothing turns. Click it to the left. There you go. The tumbler is used to reverse the directions that the cross slide or the carriage travel. So when the tumbler is clicked to the left, the carriage will travel down the bed, and the cross slide will travel towards you. When the tumbler is to the right, the cross slide will move away, so that would be your normal surfacing or facing, your normal facing direction, but the carriage will move up the bed. So for normal stuff, for turning your length of bar down, you will have the tumbler click to the left. Then we come down to the Norton 36 speed feed box, and it gives you the gears you have to use to achieve these pitches, or if you look in a bit closer, these feed rates. These are feed rates. The feed rate at the top is the millimetres per revolution of cross feed, and the bottom is the millimetres of feed for the longitudinal feed down the bed of the lathe. So we're interested in the bottom number for turning bar stock down. So where I've got this set up at the minute is on 1.5, so we're under the 1.5 mark, and we've got three of our knobs pointing to the right. If you want more information on this, I will do another video and I'll actually set the camera up and show you how you change these speeds. When you're changing these knobs, always have the lathe in neutral, have that clicked in so that you actually would drive the shafts, and turn the chuck by hand until you feel these click in and engage, because that there isn't engaged. But if you turn the thing, you can see it just jumped, it then engaged, and now our screws are moving. So always turn the chuck by hand to engage it, just to avoid powering the lathe up and ending up having some damages. So that's the feed box. Obviously we've got the gears here with the proper clearances. 2580, they're your standard metric gears. The top shaft, this threaded one, that is your lead screw. You only use the lead screw for cutting threads. This isn't like a Myford that's just got the one shaft. This is a proper, you know, training lathe. This is how a proper industrial lathe would be set up. You'd actually have one more shaft on an industrial lathe, and it'd be a clutch from the carriage instead of a clutch up on the headstock. If you're not threading, pull this out to the right. This is a dog clutch, or sort of castellated nut. And the idea is, if you're not threading, you're not wearing out your lead screw by turning it or dragging chips into the carriage. You only want to use the bottom screw, the feed screw, for surfacing or facing. And that is engaged via this handle down here, the lowest one. If you want to engage it, you just pull it up when the lathe's running, because at the minute we're just probably hitting on teeth. There you go. So that will engage either your facing or your surfacing feeds. One more point to note, this is your dial thread indicator. This lets you pick up metric threads without keeping the half nuts engaged. What are half nuts? Half nuts are what engage on the lead screw for screw cutting only, not for making cuts. And you engage that like that. You engage that, some nuts then engage on the lead screw, and that pulls the carriage down very accurately for making threads. We want to keep our lead screw accurate. We don't want to wear it out. So we don't use this for anything but threading. And if we're not using it, we keep that disengaged. Now, one more thing to disengage if you're not threading. This. You don't keep your dial thread indicator engaged when you're not threading, because it's just going to be wearing out the bronze nut, the bronze gear on there. Push it down, disengages it like that. But obviously don't disengage it while you're cutting a thread, because you'll lose where you are. Sorry, I'm filming this on a mobile. I haven't got my camera here at the minute. Let's turn that motor off, because it makes a bit of a racket. So, we now know how to engage our carriage to feed down the bed. But how do we select if we want the carriage to move or if we want the cross slide to move? Well, that is actually done with this knob down here. And you can see, it's a push and a pull. If you push it in, you get longitudinal feed, which is feed down the bed like that, or up the bed. If you pull it into the middle, it's in neutral, which is probably where you should run it most of the time, but it ends up being pushed in. You pull it out, your cross slide will now feed under power when you engage this knob. If that knob isn't engaged, you won't have any feed. So let's demonstrate that with the lathe on. So we'll aim for 215 RPMs. We're in neutral there. We'll click it one to the left because we're going to display the longitudinal feed towards the chuck. So let's turn the lathe on. Chuck's running, feed screw's going, but our lead screw isn't because it's disengaged. So you can see the feed screw at the bottom shaft is turning. We're pulled all the way out, which means our cross slide will feed. We don't want that. We want to push all the way in. Just give that a turn. It'll then go all the way in. So we can move up and down the bed as much as we like while the lathe's running, while the feed screw's turning. It isn't until we pull the bottom knob that the carriage will start feeding. So that's feeding towards the chuck. Well, you think that's great. What if I want to feed away from the chuck? I'm doing some left hand turning. Well, you stop the lathe, always stop the lathe. Turn your tumbler to the right. So using left, neutral and right, we've turned it to the right. Turn the lathe back on. The feed shaft is now turning the other way. If we engage our feed, the carriage is now moving that way up the bed, to the right. So, what if we want to do some facing? So, we've got our tumbler engaged to the right. We pull this knob out here. Remember, just give the handle a little twist and that'll let you engage all the way. We can still move our cross slide, but now when we pull that, the cross slide will feed from the outside into the centre. What if you want to feed the other way? Say you're doing some boring a recess, and you stop that, stop the lathe again, and turn the tumbler the other way. Start the lathe, pull that up, you're now feeding outwards. Change to longitudinal feed, we'll now be feeding away from the back towards the clutch, back towards the chuck. So you can see that you can't do conventional facing and conventional turning on the same tumbler setting. You must change. And that's about all you need to know. Always use the feed shaft, don't use the lead screw for turning. You only use that for threading, and that preserves your leads, your half nuts and the accuracy of the lead screw. And another note, get yourself one of these. This is a push oiler. These shafts at the end are plain bearings. They must be oiled with a little push like that, and then you can go around all your others. This is just 68, ISO 68 oil. You can go around all your other oiling points and just use the push oiler to just oil everything up. The gearbox needs oiling. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people that are new to these lathes, you have to oil these as well. Oil these points on the ends of the gears, and there's a hidden point to be oiled. Stop the lathe. If you turn these knobs on this gearbox a certain way, this pops out. That's got an oiling point in the end of it, and it's quite a difficult one to do. There you go. Just a little oiler there on the end. If we engage that, we'll get a bit more of a pump of oil in there. I'm not pumping, I think I'm out of oil. But anyway, there's one there. This should have some in here, but these were all blocked. So anyways, you just go like that. I think there's 5 points on this gearbox. Yeah, there is. There you go. Bit of oil in your feed box. That's meant to be 220, but I just use 68 and do it a bit more often. And that's all there is to know about 140s.